Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling a giant. We are dissecting a period of Indian history that is often wrapped in velvet, studded with diamonds, and stamped with that very heavy, very loaded label, the Golden Age.
That's right.
We are talking about the Gupta Vakataka era,
Why?
roughly 300 to 600 CE, and it's a time of just extreme contrasts.
It certainly is. I mean, you have the soaring poetry of Kalidasa and the mathematical brilliance of Aryabhata coexisting with the first epigraphic evidence of Sati and the real hardening of untouchability.
It's beautiful, but it's also brutal.
Precisely. It's a paradox.
And that is exactly why we are doing this. We're decoding Chapter 9 of Upinder Singh's A History of Ancient and Early Medieval India. Our mission today is to move past that glossy Golden Age narrative and really get into the structural mechanics of the empire.
Yeah, how it actually worked.
And we aren't just doing this for fun, though it will be fun. We're doing this specifically for our learner community, the listeners of the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel.
That's right. And if you are preparing for the civil services, you know the game has changed. The examiner doesn't care if you just memorize the date of a battle anymore.
Not at all.
They care if you understand the nature of the state. Was it centralized? Was it, feudal? How did the economy function? That is what we are breaking down today.
Before we jump into the time machine, I have a very important message for our Simplified UPSC family. If you are listening to this and getting value from this deep dive, here is a humble request. Please subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP channel.
It makes a huge difference.
It really helps the algorithm find other serious aspirants like you.
And if you find value in what we do, if this content helps you connect the dots, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It allows us to keep the lights on and keep bringing this super useful content to you without cutting corners.
A huge, heartfelt shout out to all our current supporters. You guys are the real backbone of this project. We really couldn't do it without you.
Truly. Thank you.
Also, don't forget to like this video and share your valuable comments. Tell us what you think. Share your own insights. That engagement is key.
And for the resources, because you can't memorize a podcast, we have free notes with practice previous year questions, the PYQs, available on our public Telegram channel.
But if you want the VIP treatment, DM the public Telegram channel to join our private Telegram library. That gets you access to all videos in this series at once, plus organized premium notes.
And we're talking detailed breakdowns, extra PYQs, and model mains answers that are basically ready to go.
Okay, business aside, let's get into the history. The Guptas, the Vakatakas. Where do we even start with this?
Well, I think we have to start with the label itself, the Golden Age. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but in historiography, the history of history writing, it's actually a bit of a weapon.
A weapon. That sounds dramatic.
It is, though. You have to remember the context of early 20th century India. British colonial historians were writing these narratives that basically said, India has always been chaotic, despotic, and backward. You need us, the British, to civilize you.
Right, the classic white man's burden argument.
Exactly. So nationalist historians, people writing back against that, they needed a counter-narrative. They looked back at the Gupta period, roughly the 4th to 6th century CE, and they saw Sanskrit literature, they saw the beginnings of Hindu temple architecture, they saw a unified empire.
Wait, they said, hold on a minute.
They said, look, we had a golden age long before the British showed up. We had a classical era just like Greece or Rome had. It was a way of reclaiming national pride.
So the Golden Age was basically a political comeback, a rhetorical move in the independence struggle.
In many ways, yes. And while it highlighted real achievements, and there were many, which we will absolutely get to, it often glossed over the cracks in the foundation.
Oh, kind of crack.
It ignored the social stratification, the plight of the lower castes, and the really important fact that the Guptas didn't actually rule the whole subcontinent. Not even close.
That's a key point Upinder Singh makes, isn't it? We call it the Gupta period, but she emphasizes that it wasn't just the Guptas.
Correct. It's the Gupta Vakataka era. While the Guptas were dominating North India, the Vakatakas were the powerhouse in the Deccan. And as we'll see, they weren't just neighbors, they were relatives. Their stories are completely intertwined.
Okay, let's look at the Guptas first then. They seem to come out of nowhere in the historical record. Who was the first big player?
Well, we had the founder, Sri Gupta, and his son Ghatotkacha, but there were probably minor kings, maybe feudatories. The real explosion onto the scene happens with Chandragupta I, and it happens not just through war, but through marriage.
The ultimate political tool in the ancient world.
And he used it perfectly. He marries a woman named Kumar Devi, She was a Licchavi princess. Now, the Licchavis were an old, prestigious clan from the Nepal-Terai region. They had lineage, they had status.
So this wasn't just a romantic match.
Not at all. By marrying her, Chandragupta, I didn't just get territory or an alliance, he got legitimacy. He was a relative nobody, and he married into the aristocracy.
And we know this because of the coins, right? I love this
Yeah.
detail. It's so telling.
Yes, the king and queen type coins. It's incredibly rare in Indian history to see a queen celebrated so openly on currency right at the start of a dynasty.
So what did they look like?
The coins show Chandragupta and Kumaragupta standing together, and on the reverse, it doesn't just say Gupta, it says Lichavaya, the Licchavis.
Wow.
He was literally bragging about his in-laws on his money. It shows you how important that connection was for his political standing.
That is a power move. Look who I married. But then comes their son, Samudragupta. And he wasn't about marriage alliances. He was about the sword.
Samudragupta is a different beast altogether. He's often called the Napoleon of India by those early historians.
Again, a colonial term, but it captures his military energy, I suppose.
It does. It paints a picture of relentless conquest. And we know about him primarily from one incredibly detailed source, the Allahabad Prashasti.
Prashasti means praise, right? It's a eulogy.
Yes, exactly. It's a eulogy, an inscription of praise. It's carved onto an Ashokan pillar in Allahabad. And you have to stop and think about the symbolism there.
Oh, absolutely. You have an Ashokan pillar representing peace and Dhamma, nonviolence.
The Mauryan ideal.
Yeah.
And Samudragupta carves his resume of conquest right over it. I mean, the audacity is just breathtaking.
That is quite the statement. I'm here and I'm rewriting the script of what it means to be an emperor.
Completely. Harishina, his court poet, composed it. And it's not just a vague, he conquered everyone. It categorizes his conquests very neatly. It's very systematic.
How so?
It says he violently uprooted the kings of Aryabhata, that's North India. He just annexed their territories. But for the kings of Dakshinapatha, the south, he followed a different policy.
He didn't annex them.
No. The inscription says he defeated them, captured them, and then showed them grace by reinstating them as his tributaries.
Why the difference? Why wipe out the north, but let the south stay under local rule?
Well, it's about logistics. It's about practical politics. Governing the deep south from Pataliputra, which is modern Patna, is logistical nightmare.
Especially back then.
Exactly. It's much better to have a submissive vassal king paying you tax and acknowledging your supremacy than to try and administer that territory yourself from thousands of kilometers away. It shows real political maturity. He wasn't just a brute. He was a strategist.
A warrior poet king, even. The sources mention he played the veena, too.
Yes, another great piece of propaganda, or perhaps a genuine reflection of his personality. We have these beautiful gold coins showing him sitting on a couch playing the veena.
So he's the conqueror and the artist.
That's the classical ideal right there.
Yeah.
Violence and high culture completely intertwined. That's the image he wanted to project.
Now let's pivot. Let's go south of the Vindhyas, the Vakatakas. You call them the poor relations myth in the notes. What's that about?
It's about how history is written. For a long time, because the Guptas were so glamorous, so well documented with their literature and coins, historians treated the Vakatakas as just a side note, a footnote.
The other dynasty.
Yeah, the less important dynasty. But Upinder Singh and other modern historians argue they were a dominant power in their own right. They controlled the Deccan, which is the crucial bridge between the north and the deep south. You can't ignore them.
And the connection between the two dynasties is fascinating, isn't it?
It's the key to understanding the geopolitics of the 4th and 5th centuries.
This brings us to Prabhavatigupta. I feel like she's one of the most underrated figures in ancient Indian history.
Oh, absolutely. She is a political powerhouse. She was the daughter of Chandragupta II, the famous Vikramaditya, Samudragupta's son, and she was married into the Vakataka royal family to a king named Rudrasena II.
So strategic marriage again, a classic Gupta move.
Pure strategy. You have to look at the map. The Guptas wanted to attack the Shaka Kshatrapas in western India, in modern Gujarat. That was the big prize, the rich ports.
And the Vakatakas were right on their southern flank.
Exactly. To launch a campaign west, they needed the Vakatakas to not attack them from the back. So what do? You marry your princess to the Vakataka king, you turn a potential enemy into family.
But here's the twist, right? Her husband doesn't live very long.
No, Rudrasena II dies young. He leaves Prabhavatigupta, a widow.
Which, in that era, could have been the end of her political life.
It could have been, but she had minor sons. And instead of stepping aside or going back home, she ruled as regent. And she didn't just rule for a year or two, she ruled for over a decade. And this is the crucial part, She ruled unmistakably as a Gupta.
How do we know that? What's the evidence?
Her inscriptions, we have her copper plate grants, the Puna copper plates, for example. In her official genealogy, she doesn't list her husband's Vakataka ancestors first, which would be the normal thing to do.
What does she do?
She lists her own Gupta ancestors first, her father, her grandfather. She refers to her Gupta Gotra. She basically ran the Vakataka kingdom as a Gupta satellite state for a while, securing that southern flank for her father to go and conquer the Shakas.
That is incredible agency for a woman in a period where we usually hear about the decline of women's status, the Manusmriti and all that.
It's the paradox again, isn't it? We see this powerful queen regent acting with total authority, and yet the normative texts, the Dharmashastras of the time, are telling women they are subordinate and must be protected by men.
So history is never a straight line. The rules on paper aren't always the reality on the ground.
Especially for the elite. For a princess, the rules were different.
Speaking of lines ending, the Gupta Empire eventually crumbles. It wasn't a sudden explosion, was it? It was more of a slow decay.
No, it was a slow bleed. The late 5th century brings the Hunas, these nomadic groups from Central Asia.
The Hunas?
Yeah.
Are these the same group as the Huns who were terrorizing Rome around the same time?
They're related groups. Part of the same wave of migrations, they start hammering the northwest frontier of India. And Chandragupta, who's the last great Gupta emperor, he manages to hold them off.
So he was a capable ruler.
Very. He's like the boy with his finger in the dike. He repels the initial invasions. But the cost was enormous. The treasury was drained, fighting these constant wars. We can see it in the archaeology.
How?
In the coins. The gold content in the coins starts dropping significantly. The currency is being debased. The economy was clearly under immense strain.
And after Chandragupta.
The dike breaks.
Yeah.
The empire fragments. And this is where we need to plug in a specific UPSC prelims insight, because this is where a lot of aspirants get tripped up.
Yes, prelims 2021, question 34, I have it here. It asked about the political vacuum after the decline of the Guptas. Who held power before Harshavardhana rose in the 7th century?
This is a classic chronology and gap question. It's a trap. Students usually study the Guptas, then they jump straight to Harsha. They forget the messy middle period.
The 6th century?
Exactly. When the Guptas collapsed, they didn't just disappear instantly. The later Guptas, a minor branch, held on in Magadha. But new powers rose in the vacuum. The Maukharis of Kanauj, who became very important because Harsha's sister married into their family.
Okay, the Maukharis. Who else?
The Maikrakas of Vallabhi and Gujarat. They became a great center of learning, especially for Jainism, and of course the Prishiputis of Thanesar in Haryana. That's Harsha's family.
So understanding Chapter 9 isn't just about the peak of the empire, it's about its disintegration. If you don't know who the Maukharis or Maitrakas were, you can't answer that chronological ordering question.
Precisely. The Golden Age didn't end with a bang. It dissolved into a patchwork of regional powers.
Yeah.
And that transition leads us directly to the next big debate on how these kingdoms were actually run. Was it a centralized empire like the Mauryas, or was it something else entirely?
And that brings us to Section 2, administration and economy. And the big one, the feudalism debate. This is a favorite topic for means questions.
It is, and for good reason. It gets to the heart of what the Gupta state actually was. The old nationalist view was that the Guptas were strong, centralized monarchs, like a perfect Hindu empire.
That's been challenged.
Heavily. Upinder Singh and many modern historians point to the emergence of what they call Indian feudalism.
Okay, let's unpack that term. How is Gupta administration different from, say, the Mauryas under Ashoka?
Well, the Mauryas, think Ashoka, think Kautilya's Arthashastra.
Yeah.
They tried to control everything from the capital, from Pataliputra. They appointed officials directly. They paid them salaries in cash. They had a massive bureaucracy.
Top-down control?
Absolutely. The Guptas, on the other hand, they adopted a system of paramountcy. As we saw with Samudragupta, they'd conquer a king, defeat him, and then giving his kingdom back as a vassal, a Samanta.
So you can keep ruling your land, just pay me tribute and show up with your army when I call.
Exactly. It's a much more decentralized, hands-off approach.
Yeah.
And even within their own core territory, the administration was tiered. You had the Bhuti, which was the province divided into Vishayas, the districts, then smaller units like Vithis, and finally the village.
But here's the interesting part, and this comes from inscriptions like the Damodarpur copper plates. They tell us who was actually running the districts on the ground, and it wasn't just some bureaucrat sent from the capital.
This is the key insight. The Damodarpur plates, which come from Bengal, show that the Vishaipati, the district head, was assisted by a board of local representatives.
A board, like a committee.
Exactly, a local council. And the inscriptions even list who was on it. They mention the Nagara Sreshti, who was the chief banker or head of the merchant guild, the Sarthava, the leader of the merchant caravans, the Prathamakulika, the chief artisan, and the Pradmamikayasta, the chief scribe.
That sounds like a local chamber of commerce was helping run the government.
It effectively was. It shows that local elites, the moneyed class, the commercial interests, had a formal say in the day-to-day administration, especially regarding land sales. The king wasn't micromanaging. He was relying on these established local power structures.
Which connects to the biggest controversy of this period, land grants, the whole agrahara system. Why on earth were kings giving away their most valuable resource, land, left and right?
It seems strange, doesn't it? Why would you give away your tax base? But it's a mix of piety and politics. The stated reason is religious merit. You give land to learned brahmanas to earn punya.
But there's a practical reason, too.
Oh, a very practical one. You're often settling these brahmanas in frontier areas or tribal belts. They bring with them plow agriculture, the Sanskrit language, the Brahmanical social order. They essentially act as agents of state formation in undeveloped areas. It expands the agrarian base and legitimizes the king's rule.
So it's a tool for cultural and economic expansion, but there's a catch, isn't there? The parihara, or the exemptions that came with these grants.
The catch that changes history. This is the crux of the feudalism debate. When the king gave these lands, he often gave them with parihara. This meant the state gave up its rights over that land.
What rights specifically?
The right to collect most taxes. And crucially, the right of entry for royal officials and soldiers. The grants often use the phrase abattachatra pravesha, not to be entered by regular or irregular troops.
Wait a minute. So if the police can't enter, who enforces the law? Who maintains order?
The grantee. The Brahmanadan becomes the de facto ruler of that little pocket of territory. He collects the revenue from the peasants, he judges disputes, he maintains order.
That sounds exactly like the definition of a feudal lord.
That is the core of the Indian feudalism argument, most famously put forward by historians like R.S. Sharma. They argue that by giving away land and the administrative and judicial rights that went with it, the Guptas and Vakatakas effectively cannibalized their own central authority.
They created a class of landed intermediaries.
Yes, who over time became powerful enough to eventually ignore the king or even challenge him. It's like outsourcing the government, piece by piece, until the central government becomes irrelevant.
And this must have had a huge impact on the economy.
It did. And it leads to this strange paradox we see in the sources. On one hand, you have the magnificent gold dinaras of the Guptas. They're beautiful, artistic objects.
The ones we mentioned with the king playing the veena or slaying a lion or a tiger?
Yes. They scream wealth, power, sophistication. But then we have the account of Faxian, or Fahim, the Chinese Buddhist pilgrim who visited India during Chandragupta II's reign.
What did he say?
He says that for daily transactions, for buying things in the market, people used cowrie shells.
Cowrie shells? Seashells? That sounds incredibly primitive compared to issuing beautiful gold coins.
It's a jarring contrast, isn't it? It suggests a scarcity of smaller denomination currency like silver or copper coins. This observation feeds into the decline of trade theory.
What's that theory?
The argument, put forward by some historians, is that after the collapse of the Roman Empire in the West, India's lucrative trade with Rome dried up. This led to a decay of urban centers, a decline in monetary circulation, and a shift to a more rural, self-sufficient, land-based economy. The land grants are seen as a symptom of this.
Is that theory still accepted? Is it true?
It's debated. It's partially true. Roman trade did drop off significantly. But what that theory sometimes misses is that trade with Southeast Asia, what the text called Suvarna Bhumi, the land of gold, absolutely exploded during this period.
So it wasn't a total death of trade, but a shift in direction, from west to east.
Exactly. And while some old Kushana-era cities in the northwest might have declined, new centers emerged elsewhere. So it's a much more complex picture than a simple story of urban decay.
Nothing in history is ever simple. Speaking of complex, let's look at the people living in this era. Section 3, Society. You've titled this The Beautiful and the Ugly.
I think you have to, because this is where the Golden Age label really gets tested.
Let's start with the beautiful. Let's talk about the life of the Nagaraka.
The urban dandy, the city dweller. We get this incredibly vivid picture from Vatsyayana's Kama Sutra. Now, most people hear Kama Sutra and they think, well,
They think of the sexual positions and that's about it.
Right, but that's only one small part of the text. It's actually a manual on social life and etiquette for the wealthy, sophisticated urban elite. It describes the ideal life of the Nagaraka.
So what was his life like?
It was a life of cultivated leisure. He has a house with a garden. He perfumes his clothes with incense. He has his daily bath and massage. His afternoons are for painting or playing the lute or teaching his pet parrot to talk. His evenings are for ghostess parties with poetry recitals, intellectual discussions, and plaitations.
It sounds like a character from a Renaissance court, a life dedicated to refinement.
It is. It shows a society, or at least the segment of it, that deeply valued aesthetics, pleasure, and culture. But we have to remember, this lifestyle was for a tiny, tiny sliver of the population.
And what about the women in this sophisticated world?
Here we see that stark contrast again. The Kama Sutra and other texts, like the plays of the time, depict the Ganika, the high-class courtesan.
And she wasn't just a prostitute.
Not at all. She was often highly educated, trained in the 64 arts, singing, dancing, painting, poetry. She could own property, she was financially independent, and she had agency. She could choose her patrons and lovers. In many ways, she was the most liberated woman in that society.
And how does she compare to the Kalastri, the family woman, the respectable wife?
Her world was shrinking. The idealization of the housewife, the perfect wife devoted to her husband, paradoxically meant more confinement. The law books of this period recommend pre-puberty marriages for upper-caste girls. Her identity was increasingly defined entirely by her husband and her family.
So the educated, independent woman was the one outside of respectable society.
Yes, and we have a grim milestone in this period regarding widows, don't we?
Yeah.
New development.
Yes. The heir inscription of 510 CE. This is a tough one.
It is. It's the first epigraphic, that is, inscriptional evidence of Sati. It's a memorial stone that records the wife of a general named Goparaja burning herself on his funeral pyre.
So it's not just in a text, it's being commemorated on stone.
Exactly. It wasn't widespread yet, it was probably still rare. But the fact that it's recorded on stone, commemorated as a noble act, is chilling. It marks the beginning of the ideological glorification of that practice.
That is a very heavy blow to the golden narrative. But it gets even darker. Let's talk about caste and untouchability.
This is the hardest pill to swallow for anyone romanticizing this era. And again, our clearest witness is the outsider, the Chinese pilgrim Faxian.
Because he noticed things that the locals probably just took for granted as normal.
Precisely. He writes about a group of people he calls the Chandalas, the untouchables.
And what does he describe?
He describes how they were forced to live outside the main city in village settlements. And when they had to enter the city for their work, which was usually unclean tasks like handling dead bodies, they had to sound a clapper, a piece of wood they would strike to make a noise.
Like a warning bell. Why?
Exactly. I'm coming. Look away. It was a warning so that the upper castes could get out of the way and avoid being polluted by even their glance or their shadow.
That is just horrific. You have a society producing the world's finest sculpture, the most beautiful poetry, and simultaneously treating a whole group of human beings like they are walking biohazards.
That is the paradox Upinder Singh wants us to grasp. The Golden Age was built on the back of an incredibly rigid social stratification. The peace and order and harmony that the Gupta inscriptions praise were often maintained by the very strict and very violent enforcement of caste rules.
So to bring it back to the exam, for a mains answer, if they ask, was the Gupta period a golden age? You can't just say yes or no.
Never. You'll get a very average score if you do. The strategy is nuance, you say. Culturally, for the elite, in the realms of art and literature, yes, it has many golden attributes. But socially, for the marginalized, for women, for the lower castes, it was an age of hardening restrictions and was absolutely not golden.
That's the kind of critical analysis that gets you the marks.
It is.
Okay, moving from the social structure to what held it together spiritually. Section 4. Religion. You call this the Puranic synthesis. This is where modern Hinduism really takes shape, isn't it?
It is a moment of crystallization. If you went back to the Vedic age, you'd see priests tending fires, chanting hymns from the Vedas, performing elaborate yajnas or sacrifices. But in the Gupta period, if you walked into a town, you'd see something much more familiar to us today: temples and idols.
The shift from yajna to bhakti, from sacrifice to devotion.
Exactly. The Puranas, these texts filled with stories about the gods, were written down and popularized in this period. They made religion accessible. You didn't need to be a Sanskrit expert or a Brahmana to understand the stories of Vishnu saving the world or Shiva's cosmic dance. All you needed was devotion bhakti.
And for Vaishnavism, the cult of Vishnu, the avatar doctrine becomes central.
It becomes huge. The idea that God doesn't just sit up in heaven, but comes down to earth in various forms, avatars, to save it from evil. The most political and visually stunning example of this is the Varaha avatar, the boar.
Right, the sculpture at the Udagiri caves in Madhya Pradesh.
Yes, is this massive, powerful relief sculpture of Varaha as a giant boar, lifting the earth goddess Bhudevi out of the cosmic ocean where she's been imprisoned by a demon. It's a powerful religious image, but it's also brilliant political propaganda.
How is it propaganda?
Well, the caves were patronized by Chandragupta II, so the message is clear. The Varaha is the king, Chandragupta, and he is rescuing the earth, his kingdom, from the chaos of his enemies, the Shakas.
It's genius branding. I'm not just a king, I'm a divine savior. What about Shaivism?
Shaivism evolves too. We start to see the Mukhalinga becoming popular. That's the linga, the abstract symbol of Shiva, but with one or more faces carved on it, making the divine more personal. And the Maheshvara aspect, Shiva, as the great lord of the universe, gains prominence.
And the goddess.
The Shakti cults, the worship of the divine feminine, also rise. We see the first panels of the Saptamatrikas, the Seven Mothers. This is really interesting because it represents the absorption of local folk goddesses and tribal deities into the mainstream Brahmanical fold. The great tradition is absorbing the little traditions.
Now, with all this Hindu, or rather Brahmanical revival happening, what happens to Buddhism and Jainism? Do they just vanish?
Not at all. That's another common misconception. The Gupta kings were personally Vaishnavas. They called themselves Paramobbhagavatas, but they were generally tolerant and patronized other faiths too. This is the era of Nalanda University.
The Oxford of the East.
Founded by a Gupta king, Kumaragupta I. It became the premier international center for Mahayana Buddhist learning. We have accounts of students coming from China, from Korea, from all over the Buddhist world to study there. It shows that intellectual curiosity often superseded religious narrowness, at least at the elite level.
So Buddhism was still thriving intellectually, and Jainism?
Jainism was also very strong, especially in Western India. They held their second great council at Vallabhi in Gujarat during this time. This is the landmark event because it's when the Jain canon, which had been passed down orally for centuries, was finally written down and codified.
So a very vibrant, competitive, and evolving religious landscape.
Absolutely. Not a monolithic Hindu state by any means.
Let's try and visualize this vibrancy. Section 5, Aesthetics. Art, architecture, and literature. I feel like this is the expert's favorite section.
I confess it is, because this is where the term classical is actually justified. It's not just a nationalist label. There is an aesthetic principle at work here.
And Upinder Singh defines classical in a specific way here. She says it's about balance.
Yes, that's the perfect word. If you look at the art of the Kushana period, which comes before the Guptas, it's very energetic, very robust, sometimes a bit fleshy and worldly. If you look at medieval art, which comes later, it gets very ornate, very detailed, sometimes a bit busy.
And Gupta art is in the middle.
It's the perfect middle. It achieves this sublime balance between the sensual, the physical beauty of the form, and the spiritual, the expression of inner calm and grace.
The ultimate example of this has to be the Sarnath-seated Buddha.
It's a masterpiece. It's probably the most iconic sculpture from ancient India. The Buddha is seated in the Dharmachakra Pravartana Mudra, which is the gesture of turning the wheel of law of his first sermon.
What makes it so special?
Everything. His eyes are half closed in deep meditation. There's a faint, serene smile on his lips. The drapery of his robe is almost transparent. It reveals the form of the body underneath, but in a very subtle way. It doesn't distract. It's not just a statue of a person. It feels like a philosophy carved in stone. You look at it, and you feel calm. That is the genius of Gupta art.
And in architecture, we finally get standing temples. We move out of the caves.
Yes, we see the transition from rock-cut caves to structural temples. And the crucial site, the one you have to remember, is the Dashavatara Temple at Deoghar in Uttar Pradesh.
Why Deoghar? What's so important about it?
Two big innovations. First, it's one of the earliest temples to have a shikara tower. Early Gupta temples were flat-roofed, like little square boxes. Deoghar starts reaching for the sky. This is the beginning of the classic Indian temple silhouette.
And the second innovation?
It introduces the Panchayatana style. That means 5 shrines. You have one main central shrine surrounded by 4 smaller shrines at the corners. This becomes the blueprint for many of the massive medieval temple complexes, like the ones at Khajuraho that come hundreds of years later.
And we can't ignore the brick temples, like the one at Bittigaon.
Which shows incredible engineering skill. They were using true arches, not just corbelled ones. Building a tall, stable structure out of baked brick is not easy.
But the Vakatakas didn't lag behind in patronage, did they? They gave us Ajanta.
Well, they patronized the later, and perhaps most beautiful, phase of Ajanta. The earlier caves are Satavahana, but the Vakatakas are responsible for caves like Cave 1 and Cave 19 and the breathtaking paintings inside them.
The Padmapani Bodhisattva.
The Padmapani Bodhisattva in Cave 1. The expression of compassion on his face, the subtle shading, the sheer elegance of it. It's arguably the pinnacle of ancient Indian painting.
Okay, let's link this to a mains question. I remember one from 2015, GS1, it was a strange one, about Mesolithic rock-cut architecture, comparable to modern painting.
A very tricky question. It asked you to compare Mesolithic, basically Stone Age cave art, to modern painting. But implicitly, it's a question about the evolution of the artistic tradition in India. You can't answer that without talking about the journey.
So you have to trace the lineage.
You have to build the bridge. You say the tradition of painting on rock surfaces that began at Bhimbetka in the Mesolithic period reaches its classical maturity and refinement in the murals of Ajanta under the Vakatakas. Ajanta is the crucial link in that long chain of artistic continuity.
Let's move to literature and science. We have the Shakespeare of India, Kalidasa.
The brightest star of the Gupta court. Abhihana Shakuntalam, or Shakuntala, is his most famous play. But for pure lyrical poetry, my personal favorite is Meghaduta the Cloud Messenger.
Tell us about it.
The story is simple. A yaksha, a nature spirit, is exiled from his home in the Himalayas. He's heartbroken, missing his wife. He sees a cloud drifting northwards and asks to carry a message to her.
A message in a cloud.
Yes. And as he describes the cloud's journey, Kalidasa essentially gives you a lyrical geography of Gupta India. He describes the landscapes, the rivers, the cities, the people, all from a bird's eye view. It's almost a travelogue wrapped in the most beautiful poetry imaginable.
And science. It's astonishing what was happening. We were calculating eclipses while Europe was entering the Dark Ages.
It's incredible. You have Aryabhata. His book, the Aryabhata, is a landmark. He stated correctly that the Earth rotates on its axis, which explains day and night.
In eclipses.
He explained eclipses scientifically. He said the solar eclipse is caused by the moon blocking the sun, and the lunar eclipse by the Earth's shadow falling on the moon. He dismissed the old mythological explanation of a demon, Rahu, eating the sun, and he calculated the value of pi to a remarkable accuracy.
And then there's Varahamihira.
The great encyclopedist. His Brihat Samhita is a monumental work. It covers everything: astronomy, astrology, botany, architecture, gemology, even perfumes. It shows a scientific temper and a desire to classify and understand the entire world.
And the proof is in the pudding, or rather in the pillar, the Iron Pillar of Delhi, near the Qutb Minar.
The rust-free wonder. It's been standing out in the open through the Delhi monsoon and sun for 1,600 years, and it has barely corroded. It's made of almost pure wrought iron. Modern metallurgists still struggle to replicate that level of corrosion resistance. It's a testament to the advanced metallurgical skill of the time.
Okay, we have covered the history, the art, the society. Now let's get tactical. Section 6, PYQ, linkage, and exam strategy. This is the simplified UPSC value add.
Let's do it. First, let's talk prelims. The examiner loves terms. They will pick a specific word from this period and ask you what it means.
Terms like Vishti, we see that pop up.
Yes. Vishti means forced labor. It seems to have become more common in this period, often mentioned in the land grants. Peasants were compelled to provide free labor to the state or the land grantee. If you see Vishti, think state coercion, rural exploitation.
And the administrative terms like Bhukti.
You have to know the hierarchy. Bhukti is a province, the largest unit. A Bhukti was divided into Vishayas, which are districts. Don't mix them up. They will give you a match the columns question with these terms.
Another term I've seen is Gatika.
A Gatika refers to a college or an educational institution, often attached to a temple, especially in South India a bit later. But the concept starts rooting around here. It was a center of higher learning.
And besides terms, chronology is the other killer in prelims.
Absolutely. You have to have the mental timeline straight. Remember the sequence. Mauryas, highly centralized, post-Mauryas, where you have the Kushanas and Satavahanas, a period of booming trade. Then the Guptas, the so-called Golden Age, but with feudal beginnings. And then the post-Gupta period, Harsha, and the rise of regional fragmentation.
So if you can place an event or a dynasty within that broad flow, you can eliminate a lot of wrong options.
You can. It's about knowing the big picture.
Now, main strategy, that dreaded Golden Age question. Critically analyze whether the Gupta period can be considered a Golden Age.
We touched on this, but let's structure it perfectly. The strategy is balanced critique. Never take a one-sided stand. You should structure your answer like this.
Okay, walk us through it.
1. Your intro briefly defines the period and introduces the Golden Age label as a historiographical concept, mentioning the nationalist historians. 2. Your first body paragraph argues for the Golden Age. This is where you put all the good stuff.
Art, literature, science.
Exactly. Sarnath Buddha, Kalidasa, Aryabhata, the Deogar Temple. Show them, the achievements. 3. Your second body paragraph argues against the Golden Age. This is where you bring in the critique.
The rust.
The rust. Social rigidity, the evidence of untouchability from Faxian, the declining status of women, the first evidence of Sati, the emergence of feudalism through land grants that weaken the central state.
And then the conclusion.
Your conclusion synthesizes the two sides. You say it was a period of immense cultural crystallization and artistic achievement, but this was predicated on a deeply unequal and rigid social structure. It set the template for classical India, for better and for worse.
That is a model answer right there. It shows both knowledge and analytical school.
And one final tip, don't forget the Vakatakas. If you're writing a mains answer about the Gupta period, and you can drop in a line about Prabhavatigupta's Regency or the Vakataka patronage of Ajanta, you immediately signal to the examiner that you have read beyond the basic textbooks. You show depth.
This has been a massive deep dive. We've gone from the battlefields of Samudragupta to the quiet meditation of the Sarnath Buddha, and the dark outskirts of the city where the Chandalas were forced to live.
It's a period of crystallization. That's the word I'd use. Puranic religion, temple architecture, classical Sanskrit. So many of the things that we recognize as core elements of Indian culture today really took their definitive shape in this era.
But I want to leave our listeners with a final provocative thought to chew on.
Go for it.
If the Golden Age, the peak of our ancient art and literature and science, relied on a strict social hierarchy and the systematic exclusion of so-called polluting castes, what does that tell us about the cost of high culture in the ancient world? Can you even have one without the other in a pre-modern agrarian society?
That is a heavy question. It forces us to ask, golden for whom? And that critical thinking, that ability to question the labels, is exactly what the UPSC wants from an aspirant.
A huge thank you to everyone for listening. If this deep dive helped you connect the dots for your UPSC prep, please subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PPP.
And check the Telegram channel for the free notes and that PYQ breakdown. Don't just listen. You have to practice.
And for the serious aspirants, the premium library is waiting for you. Just DM us on the public channel. We'll see you in the next deep dive.
Keep learning.